It is the Anfield Wrap. I'm Neil Atkinson and I'm joined by Rob Gutmann, by Phil Blundell and by Neil Jones, and we are this season sponsored by Green King Sport, where football is more than a game. Green King Sports venues are showing every televised Liverpool fixture over the course of the season, so you can get your mates together and get to a local Green King pub to get closer to the action. They've actually recently launched the Green King Sports Instagram page, where there will be fan content. You've got me and Gibbons talking about the Europa League this week, if you want that. And then you'll go to Carabao Cup the week after. Imagine what pleasures are in store there. So if you go to their Instagram page, you'll be able to see that. Deals, competitions. I quote lyrics by the Long Blondes, which I don't think anyone else is going to do. So if you drop them a follow, you won't just be the first to know about all this, but you'll be helping out the Anfield Wrap, and we always appreciate that sort of thing as well. But a pleasure to be with Rob, Phil and Neil after what became a pleasurable time. Wolverhampton Wanderers 1, Liverpool 3, and Neil Jones, I'll go to you first on it. Two things end up defining the game. One is the half-time sub/change of shape from a Liverpool point of view. The other is the Cunha miss non-shot. I think whilst these games against the bottom sides for this year's Liverpool team, whilst they're still at 1, you feel like anything's possible. If it had gone 2, it'd have been a hammer blow.
Yeah, and probably you couldn't have argued either if it had gone 2. I think the way Liverpool approached the first half, you would have said, if they were 2-0 down, said, yeah, they've asked for that, really. I think the one thing I think is back in Liverpool's play is a bit of certainty in it, and I even mean certainty when they look uncertain. It's almost like it won't last, this, and I think a lot of people felt, I definitely did watching it, I thought half time will be alright here, this will sort it. And I thought they'd make a change, but I also thought they'd come out different in the second half, and I also thought that the fitness would tell. And I think maybe the most encouraging thing of all of these first 5 weeks, or first 5 games, is I feel like Klopp's got the squad again, where it's not just he's got players, he's actually got players who aren't, they're not upset that they're not in the team, but they're determined to make an impact, and when they come on, you can just see it when they bring them on. And that was what really defined, I thought, when Liverpool became champions of everything, was that players could be out of the team for 6 weeks, but when they come in, they would deliver. And you saw that with, for example, for Quansah in the game. You look at, I think he'll be a talking point among fans, but I think you've got to give Joe Gomez massive props for the second half. I thought after what happened in the first, I thought he could have shrunk. He didn't. You look at Elliott coming on. You look at Luis Diaz, who is up there, I think, in terms of one of the best subs around. I think when he comes on in games, Diaz, and he tends to gets the call early, I think he makes such a big difference. And Darwin, of course, as well. So he's got a lot of options. I think he's still trying to figure out the best starting teams in games, and he's made some mistakes this season with selections. But it doesn't half help when you've got players, motivated players and quality players, to come off the bench and change it. And I thought it only took me 30 seconds in the second half to think Liverpool are going to win this game.
It's one, Phil, where that change of shape is massive, but I'll go back to the miss, or what is even a non-shot. It's not even come up on all the stats modelling because he doesn't get a shot off, which often this is the sort of thing that...
Is this the thing from the Neto cross?
Yes.
Yeah. Where he tries to head it and it hits his chest.
He basically, yes, he does everything wrong.
Yeah, it's awful.
But it's on a plate for him, and in it, Rob, I think that's...
Sorry, it's
okay, no, I'll go to you, but you're frisky. I always like it when you're frisky. I think there's a thing where, you do get away with one, and what I liked about that was it felt to me almost like Liverpool responded because they don't have another shot in anger that's half decent. Wolves after that point, that's 35 minutes, and they have 4 or 5 more efforts over the course of the game. They're all really low value. I had a look at the statistical number, but it felt like Liverpool went, right, we've got away with one here, and now we build on the fact that we've got away with one. They got into half time, they made the change, they grew and grew, and from that point, as I say, I really do think it's a turning point moment. Liverpool dodged that particular bullet and they don't look back.
No, I really strongly agree with Neil that you did feel the difference between last time we were there in the league, when was it, Feb time or something, and got beaten 3-0, was they just didn't look a way back. Maybe that's because we go 2 and 3 down, or 2 down by half time, don't we? At 1-0, I thought, as Neil said, it's not going to last forever. This is a better team with more which has got something in the bank at the moment, some belief, and. Yeah, if it stays at 1-0, stays at 1-0 at half time, we'll win 2-1. It was It was scary, though. It was a scary 25 minutes while it lasted, because we did get a view of an alternate future. Let's put it this way. I don't think there's a Liverpool fan who watched that who could deny that.
There was a bit of looking into the abyss, wasn't there?
There was looking into the bloody abyss. We went, oh, fuck. All these changes, all this huff, all this puff, all this 15-match unbeaten run, and look where we're back at. On this day, at this place, playing exactly the same game in Groundhog Nightmare away again. So the way it turns around, the manner of the turnaround, the series of events, we may come to look at this as one of the most important Liverpool matches of the modern era. I don't know. I don't want to overstate these things.
Do you think it reminded you a little bit? I'm going to the title season, but the Southampton one very early in that season when they played Chelsea.
Yeah.
And if you remember it, I remember it vividly because of Adrian was in goal and gave a goal away, didn't he? But it was horrific, the game. It was like one of them where you was like, oh God. But it was. I remember saying as we were driving out, I said, that's a big win for Liverpool. I said that's one of them that like they used to not win. And last season in particular, Liverpool lose that game 1-0, 2-0 maybe, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think if people want to look negatively on it, go, well, look, you know what, Newcastle maybe got away with one, we all got carried away. Maybe, Wolves, it looks convincing, could have been worse if Cunha had scored. You go, Chelsea had a good hour against, hang on a second. But I often compare a couple of seasons you can look at. The City season where they end up with, I think, 101 points. In that first 8 or 9 games, they have a lot of single-goal wins. And these aren't even single 3-2s where they're behind.
Sterling scores a 97-minute goal.
I know, exactly. So, I mean, I never forget the great 87-88 team which John Barnes broke and Beardsley broke through. In the first 5, there's a few narrow wins there. I think there's like a 4-3 at home to a very relegation-y, or 3-2 at Anfield, and everyone's going, fucking hell, we're shipping goals here. But from those acorn-like results, mighty oaks and confidence grows.
I think for me, Phil, I think there's a marker across the whole weekend, and it's something, a pattern that I've seen already, not just with us, but with other teams' games as well. All of us, Tottenham and City, fall behind and come back to win. Tottenham
can take that outside of this country as well, by the way, because Real Madrid went 1-0 down, PSG went 1-0 down, Bayern Munich don't win.
Yep.
They've been behind a lot.
Loads of things that have happened.
lost.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, lost 3-1.
Villa as well go 1-0 down to Palace. If you want to really stretch the point, Villa go 1-0 down to Palace, and in the end they pull clear, get what looks on paper like a comfortable 3-1 as it goes there. They managed to do the thing. But I think it's been observable not just in this game week, but in previous ones as well, that I do feel as though sides, especially on their own turf, and I understand completely why, they're almost putting all the chips on the first 25. Can we catch them cold? Can we surprise them with 1 or 2 little tweaks? Can we find a way to turn them round? Can we be physical and direct? And then it becomes, and it's interesting, I thought O'Neill's post-match stuff, match of the day, everywhere he spoke post-match, I thought O'Neill was really interesting, because it was almost as though he was going, we needed more of a buffer. We knew they were going to come back into it. We knew we couldn't keep them at arm's length. We needed more of a buffer. And I wonder if this is maybe the pattern, at least until Christmas, where all sides, no matter how good we think they are, including ourselves, they're going to go to places and there's going to be 1 or 2 players who can hurt you, and they're going to have a good plan as to how they're going to do that for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then you've got to work their plan out, and then you've got to put your own plan in place.
Yeah, and I thought that is exactly what they did. I thought their approach was really interesting, and that they were very happy to just let Joel Matip have the ball. They stood off him. You don't really see it now, where you'll always think that teams, they want to press people and get in the face, but it was very much a case of, we're going to let him have the ball and we're going to fill all the space in, and they filled all the space in. Probably didn't really help that we had a forward line that didn't really want to go in behind them, and I don't think that
100%.
And narrow.
Because it basically...
Nobody made any runs.
And Matip's basically, he's got the ball, and there's not a great deal of movement, there's not a great deal of space, and there isn't just sort of a lazy out ball, if you like, where you can just put it over the fullback's head and someone will run in behind, because we just didn't...
And they were high.
Exactly. The players there just didn't really have the pace for it. And the only thing is, I would have liked us to possibly have worked this out a little bit sooner and come up with a better solution with the players that were there. But I don't think that helps. I don't think it helped McAllister either.
Jota gets in a couple of times last 15 of the first half, and that began to be a bit of a...
There was one he fizzed across the face of goal, where I was sort of a bit like, if it was... I almost felt like Gakpo and Jota were the wrong way round. And I think when they play together, I'd rather they were the other way round, I think, because I feel like Gakpo can do more against the fullback and Jota might find more space, like the one where Jota fizzes it over the face of goal. If it was Gakpo putting it over, I think Jota's probably in there to, if not score, at least get a shot off. And I thought the approach was, as Neil said, I took until about 48 minutes and I just went, well, we'll win this game, because it was the approach was so different. Whereas it was Matip on the ball in that way first half, after half time it was Szoboszlai or Jones, and they weren't allowed to have as much time, which meant that there was a little bit more space in behind, and it just became a lot easier. And Wolves, I don't know if they could do what they were doing first half for 90, but they didn't do it anyway. Whether they could have done it, they didn't have the option because Liverpool didn't do it. We changed the shape. It was the shape changed straight away because Jota's playing right side for 7-8 minutes of that second half before he actually does go off, and it felt much easier. And I'm almost quite happy that it didn't work first half in some ways, because I think we can. The idea that Joe Gomez was doing an inverted fullback was I'd say questionable decision at best, and that's probably been a little bit generous. So now, what it's given the manager, he's gone, right, well, okay, next time, that's not the way home, but I've seen what the way home is.
On that field, the selection setup thing, he goes Quansah over Konate, and in the end, I think that bears fruit for him. Liverpool win the game for one, and Quansah's on the pitch when it, for much of that second half. But I wonder if that sort of made Liverpool, when they were being harassed early in the game, feel a little bit less secure, knowing that they've got someone who's making the debut in there, Gomez at right back and what he was being asked to do, McAllister in there as well. Even, as you say, with the idea of neither Jota nor Gakpo looking like they want to run behind. There's 4 or 5 things there where I feel a bit like could have picked a different player, could have set up a little bit differently. Now, he tell you what, the manager's brilliant at his job from 45 minutes onwards. It's irresistible, but it is worth pointing out that there's a few bits in there.
So at the same time, though, the manager can only do so much. Like McAllister and Szoboszlai, for periods, didn't look like they were physically capable of passing to a red shirt. That's not a team selection thing. That's a decision-making process of the players, and you can't control everything.
I agree.
I agree on some of the stuff. I don't necessarily agree on Quansah. I just thought they left Quansah to him like he was a normal centre half. I think they were happy to let him defend one-on-one on the halfway line. They were happy enough to let him use the ball. Like, we've got experience in the last 4 or 5 years of watching sort of in the nicest possible way centre backs who are there because they absolutely have to be and there's no other solution. And it didn't feel like they approached him like that. Like in the run-in in 2021. It felt like we protected Nat Phillips and Reece Williams, and it felt like the decisions we were making were about sort of protecting them and not exposing them. Whereas with Quansah, it felt like they were just happy to let him get on and play his game, and I really enjoyed that element of it.
I thought he was so encouraging, Quansah, and I think even more so in the fact that he's a surprise elevation to the first team. I don't mean that. In a bad way. I just mean it's not been signposted anywhere that Jarell Quansah's coming through. It's been Reece Williams. We sort of knew that, but we knew Billy Cometio was coming through.
In the summer, Neil, after the Colwell thing, I can't remember if it was you, but I'm pretty sure someone did, when it was talking about the profile of centre-back that Liverpool were looking at, and it was sort of a young player who won't start.
Who can be fifth choice. Yeah.
And it feels like they almost went to Singapore and went... That's him.
And that's the other thing. I honestly, there was just a couple of moments in the game where I went, "Whoa, that is Colwell." He was stood on the ball, rolling it back under his studs, saying, "Come and get it, and I'm going to play it into Szoboszlai as soon as you come." And I thought, "Wow, that's either someone who's listening to what he's been told, or is just naturally that kind of player." And honestly,
I thought his passing was the most encouraging thing.
If you said Liverpool play now, and the only change they're going to make is Van Dijk's coming back in, you're not taking Quansah out. You're taking Matip out of the two. In my opinion, the way he's done it. And listen, you can't. He's going to have some bumps in the road. There'll be a game where you go, "Oh God, he's been found out," or whatever it is. But if you talk about your first Premier League start, you've played 16 games for Bristol Rovers in League One. With great respect to Bristol Rovers and to Joey Barton and his staff, I imagine it's a different type of football than what he's playing at Liverpool. I thought he was outstanding, and I thought it was almost quite fitting that he got cramped towards the end. It was almost like, you've absolutely give it one, haven't you, today? Like, good on you. And then Konate comes on and even has a couple of big moments himself.
I was reading your blog this morning. You said that is it Pep and Vitor Matos had sort of in the last year, in particular, they think he's come on a bit.
Yeah, I think if you compare him to Reece Williams, as Phil, when Reece Williams came in, I think Reece Williams looked like a big lad, but a big young lad.
Kidderminster though.
Yeah. But he was wiry and skinny, wasn't he? And sort of like, when he had to run, you sort of looked at him and thought, he looks so he hasn't found his body yet. I just think you look at Quansah and you go, he'd throw forwards around, wouldn't he? You're not going to out-jump him. He looks like he's quick. I mean, we didn't see too much of him having to absolutely.
He certainly isn't slow.
It's his personality for me.
But he looks like he's got a frame about him. And I think that was the first thing that stood out about Konate when he came to Liverpool. I watched him at Norwich in the Carabao, and he chased someone down into the fullback. and it was like he was full pelt, but he was strong at the same time. And I feel like Quansah's got similar sort of frame. Like he's 20, but he's got his man sort of strength already, and that'll do him really well wherever he ends up. He might not make it at Liverpool, but wherever he ends up, he's going to be a pretty good centre back, isn't he? You know, in terms of a natural. He's not going to be one of those who, he was big, young, and sort of was over promoted, and now he's settled back down. He's going to be a sort of a centre back that can handle himself.
He's also not like a goofy kid, rabbit in the headlights. I know you said he's not like he's very cool. And as well as looking like a fella,
captain in the under-18s in the Youth Cup final. I remember we interviewed him. It was in the Zoom days, and I said to him, "Oh, you've always been the captain?" And he was like, "No," and he was like laughing. He was looking to like the press. He said, "If you'd have asked, I think Barry must have been in the room, Barry Lutus, and he said if you'd have asked Barry if I was going to be his captain, you know, when I was 13 or whatever, he'd have said absolutely no chance. Could never open my mouth." But you know, even sort of being able to say that, it was like, you clearly have got a bit of personality about you, and listen.
Early days.
2 games into his Liverpool career, but both cameos, both signs of him been really, really positive.
I felt like there was a couple of things he felt he could have done better as well. Not even when he'd done something bad. Like there was one sort of in front of me where he puts it out for a throw-in, and he looked clearly annoyed that he hadn't tried to sort of bring it down and do something with it. Yeah. And I'm a bit like, hang on, that's a really impressive level of confidence, because most of the time, he was effectively one-on-one with, I think it was Cunha, and we're talking probably 30 yards away from goal on the touchline, and his thought process is clearly, I could have done better than giving them a throw in there, and that's what you want to see.
As part of the way that second half goes, Phil, I want to come on in a minute and talk about Jones and Szoboszlai, but the first thing I want to talk about in general is when we do get on top. It's a funny one to watch back, because I take yours and Neil's point, but even at 1-1, I was beginning to do the deal with myself that a point in this one, I always thought this would be a difficult game, there's the reasons why. But then when I watched it back in the cold light today, I watched it and I went, nah, that was always going to go to Liverpool, because there was a real turn of the screw, I feel. And I think their goal, the goal they concede, and by the way, if you're doing the Wolves version of the Anfield Wrap, that second goal, you are pulling it. Yeah, Jose Sarr. You're pulling Sarr to pieces. You're pulling about 4 or 5 of the defenders to pieces. Everyone acts as though Robertson's in some way, shape or form doesn't count.
Invisible.
Yeah, until he kicks it in the goal.
Static. And somebody doesn't. Who's the one lad who's clearly his job to track him?
Yeah.
They just go, well, look, where's he going?
What does he think he's doing?
He won't score.
He's a left back. He's not allowed to do that.
Yeah,
their reaction, they're frozen. It's you do 45 minutes on the Wolves Monday
show. It was a
show.
carbon copy. Matip scored one, didn't he? Was at Leeds at Anfield. It was a carbon copy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But what I think there is about it though, Phil, is they've just had 30-35 of being worked and worked and worked. The Sarr thing, Andy pointed out to me live at the time while we were watching it. Sarr doesn't get his head back in that game because he knows how dreadful he is with that kick, and he's all over the place. But they all are, and I think they're all a bit like, lad, you couldn't just kick. They're all thinking to themselves, couldn't he have kicked that better under these circumstances?
Also, he took the corner, and it was a real Szoboszlai, get it out, don't put it on the goalie. And you think that's lie on the ball, isn't it? And he's done it because Joe Gomez actually does quite well, because I think Joe Gomez sort of gives him one of that, doesn't he? He ends up put it up in the air.
At first I thought it was like, well, that might be a foul, that.
Yeah.
Always handled it outside the box.
He was almost outside the box. I think that's why he ends up kicking it, because he goes, oh God, I better let go of this.
But I think it's a really good example of a team that are just knackered, that have been done, that have had to work and concentrate and pulled this way and that, and also a team who, and I think that this is the other flip side of O'Neill's comments when he's saying himself we didn't feel as though we had enough of a buffer, when he's making that sort of noise. When I watched the second half back, one of the things I was taking from it was Wolves are almost a bit like, well, we're going to get beat now because we didn't make it 2-0. That's why the Cunha thing is such a big deal. They're almost like we needed the other goal because we're always going to concede one. And then when we concede, you know what I mean? It felt like there was a real element of fatalism about it, and finally Liverpool did the decent thing.
Yeah, it was like watching a team play an Alex Ferguson team, sort of, when they would just score loads of late goals and they just ramp on, they'd be more attackers on, there'd be 2 wingers, there'd be, just get as many men in the box as possible and hope for the best, and you get them pressed back and you get them to make mistakes. Like, what is Sarr? Like, it's bad from Sarr. It's not so much the kick as bad, as Neil said, it's the speed with which he elected to kick it. Like, he should be just getting on that ball, holding on to it and going, 5 minutes plus injury time left here, let's just slow this down. We've not really been in this game second half, this is final. And he's trying to get him off on a counter-attack, and he did it a couple of times before that as well, actually, I think. And it just made no sense whatsoever. But defending is the hardest thing to do from a sort of energy point of view, because you have to, if you're attacking, you can switch off mentally for 5 seconds and it doesn't really matter. If you do it defensively, you can see the goal, and that's basically.
And
what
if 4
happened.
of you all do it at once, which is sort of what does
you
happen.
switch off, and it's mentally tiring.
Another example as well of just Salah's sort of ramped up passing game as well, isn't it? In the season, I mean, that's 3 or 4, is it at least this season where you go, that's a bit special, isn't it? Like, you know, sort of.
The threads, aren't they, through the eye of the needle?
Proper, like, the proper
pace, it's the
help
pace.
yourself, aren't they? And like, sort of, and I think it's, you know, he probably does look less dangerous, doesn't he? Within the game, you don't really feel like Salah's going to score. You
never feel his pace is going to hurt anyone anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Or he's going to. I can't remember the last time he sort of had that left foot curler that we used to see early on, but. It's almost like he's just said, well, I've got another special move here, so you stand off me and I'll just, there you go, it's through your legs or it's round between 2, and it's
this is what the greats do. I literally saw Dalglish do the same trajectory. He later decided, okay, if I can't be the fastest,
John Barnes.
Yeah, well, John Barnes is because of the injury. I think he just can't be but I think just legs. But to have that, when you go, well, you could have shown that earlier, and you're thinking, well, I was too busy scoring goals.
You know? And he still is as well.
Yeah,
that's the best bit.
Moving on to the middle of the park, Roberto. And there is, right to praise Salah. I want to come back around onto the change of shape because I think it's really interesting, the idea of what comes next. But I think the first thing that defines it is firstly going to whether you want to call it 4-4-2, 4-2-4, 4-2-3-1, whatever you want to call it.
4-4-2.
And I'm happy to call it 4-4-2 because that's what I think it is as well. And Jones and Szoboszlai absolutely dominate the game for Liverpool. They nullify Wolves. I think the two of them in that second half period are absolutely brilliant, both in and out of possession. It was brilliant to see.
Yeah, it was really good. Liverpool played 4-4-2 in the throwback way as well, which I really enjoyed. It's kind of it's the most least fashionable formation for now. It feels like it's getting on 20 years, and that's suddenly going, well, that's interesting, isn't it? What if you actually play football the way it felt like it was played for a good 30 years before that? It suits the players. I mean, the interesting thing about 4-4-2 is it was always, you know, in its sort of 60s to 90s heyday, it was always lopsided in that one of the guys would be actually a bit of a winger and the other one would tuck in a bit. And with Luis Diaz licensed to explode at people down the left, and Harvey maybe later on tucked in a little bit more centre midi, but those two lads were perfect for it. One stays, one goes. You know, you don't have to be a jacker. You don't have to be. In a way, the evolution of the Makelele role meant if you're absolutely brilliant at that one thing, well, you're not doing it. You had to. That was the skill set. Now it's sort of back of, well, you know, if you look at the balance in midfield, you got, okay, yeah, on Saturday it was Jones and Szoboszlai. Maybe it could be Endo and Gravenberch. I think you could probably perm not any, but you could probably perm a few of the lads we're calling eights. Give them that job in a double pivot. Thiago obviously comes into the mix, but you could go on, and you could find about 4, 5, 6 combinations that Liverpool could do that with because of the way the squad is. I mean, sorry, Neil.
Sorry, I was going to say I cocked up on Friday. We were having a chat with Klopp after the press conference, and I was asking about Gravenberch, and I tried to ask him a question: have you just bought centre mids as opposed to specialists? You know, like you've lost a specialist in Fabinho. Obviously, Endo's. I still think. There's probably we might all be miscategorising Endo a little bit, in that he can actually probably play as, you know, just a normal midfield player as opposed to a sitter. But I tried to ask him that, and I just didn't phrase it correctly and didn't get the answer. But I do think that there might have been a little, there might even just be a lurch towards centre mids.
So
as opposed to number 6 and number 8. It might just be, look, if you got he's just a centre mid, and Szoboszlai and Jones were centre mids, weren't they? It was like having, I don't know, this is probably too high praise, but Steven Gerrard and Brian Robson type midfielders, weren't they? They were just like, well, he'll go and win it if he has to, and he'll go and play forward if he can, and he can switch it if he needs to. And I think the biggest thing from it all was, if you win second balls, a lot of the time you'll end up winning the game. And Liverpool won. How many times did Curtis pick up a second ball in that left bit? Szoboszlai did that on the right, and it felt like every time you look down and then look back up, one of them was on the ball, and that wasn't the case in the first half. Every time you look down and look back up, one of them was giving it away.
It also gives you that formation gives you the old-fashioned defensive stability against width. So first half, we're so narrow. There's Semedo on the one side, and who's ahead of him, and then Neto on the other side. They only ever had to face up a fullback, or one ball inside the fullback, and they were away. Suddenly you've got old-fashioned right-sided midfielders. Your first defensive job is to help out your fullback. And we had players doing that again.
Yeah, I think you can possibly chalk this up as the way when Trent isn't there. I think.
Yeah.
The first half was peculiar in terms of, I've talked about this quite a lot before, but how many times that the players in certain positions are going to touch the ball. Now, if you're playing Joe Gomez as that inverted fullback, you're effectively saying we're happy with Joe Gomez making 100 passes.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think anybody is really thinking, well, I really want to watch Joe Gomez make 100 passes.
Including Joe Gomez, I think it's a crucial detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to come up with something that is different, and that the second half just looks so obviously like something that Liverpool should be pursuing, even probably when Trent is there. And to be honest, there's probably games where you could use him as one of the two as well. You could probably use him as where Elliott played. You could use him...
Gomez right back, him in the middle.
Absolutely.
Why not?
There's so many options with that, and it also, what it does do is if the game changes, you can get out of it very easily and do other things, particularly if Trent is there. It just looks... It works better.
One of the things that struck me, and maybe it is a good question to ask him if the opportunity comes this week, is the speed with which Liverpool clicked into it, Phil.
Yeah.
It made me wonder if it's something they've got their eye on anyway. And I think that's... I feel as though it's in the lack of Trent aspect to an extent, but also with the Europa League games on the horizon. I sort of I've wondered all the way through the summer whether or not we might see a bit of Liverpool 4-4-2 in the Europa League. And the ease with which it felt like everyone knew what this was. And you've got to be careful when you talk about that with 4-4-2, because it's what you play growing up, or in the past it was anyway. Like, it almost feels like the most natural football formations. Maybe I'm an old man now, but I think I'm right in that.
It fills the pitch.
Yeah, it fills the pitch nicely, and it feels like, so you don't want to get too carried away with, because firstly, they're all really clever footballers. They wouldn't be where they were if they weren't. But also, secondly, everyone, it sort of feels like it comes a little bit naturally. But I do think there is a thing there where I was struck by, everyone knows this. Like, the pressing was sharp and smart. I sort of wonder if maybe Liverpool have been working on this a bit more than we'd think.
I think that's... I think when we say 4-4-2, I think it looked more like 2-4-4.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Because Robertson was very,
especially.
Robertson felt like he was more on a level with the two midfielders, certainly, than the two centre backs.
Well, I think Robertson...
There was a period where he was playing left wing.
Well, what I think on
left wing.
What I think on that, Phil, to break it down a bit more, is I think the shape worked very well for everyone, but the two midfielders who I thought were great.
Yeah.
I thought it really helped Robertson. And even though the goal comes from a set piece breakdown, it doesn't surprise me, because all he's been doing is marauding forward for so much of the half. I thought, I thought it really helped Elliott.
Yeah.
I think it suits Elliott down to the ground massively, and obviously he gets his goal as well. You can argue it helps everyone. The two big ones, Diaz has already been mentioned. Nunez, though,
I think you have to have Nunez in that 4-4-2.
Yeah.
As in, I don't think it works if you're forward to a Gakpo and Jota. I think you have to have that pace, that stretch of the
focal
pitch.
point.
Yeah, and also it helps that he's informed, doesn't it? And he's on it. From the minute go. I know it was poor, but I loved the fact that the first thing he done is just went, get out the feet. I'm having a shot from somewhere mad, and it went wide. And you think, do you know what though? That's just someone who's like, well, I'm coming on here to win this game. I'm coming on to make an impact.
It also creates the thing with the defenders where they're like, right, he might do that next time. Because Liverpool didn't look like they were going to have a shot from 25 yards at any stage before that. Mainly because they weren't getting the ball into the right areas, but it created a little bit of uncertainty with them, and they were sort of like, this is different now.
I think he looks, Phil, in this shape, but also I think that we saw it against Villa. I think you see it in the end against Newcastle, because it helps when you bang two in. He looks like one of the hardest footballers you could ever play against, because it's the full range of gifts combined with the unpredictability, combined with the physical aspect, combined with that now he's got Salah, if you see what I mean, and Salah enjoying it. And that's where I think it is interesting to absolutely run with Robs. It's like an old style 4-4-2. One of these fellas is 6'3" and the other one's 5'9".
Yeah.
Like all the hits,
large,
all the hits are there with it. But it's not like you're dealing with Mick Harford and Brian Steen. Is that right?
Jesus Christ.
Paul
Walsh played up
Paul
front.
Walsh, Mick Harford. There we are, he's right, Rob.
That variety.
Mick Harford, Paul Walsh, although, I'm going to end up damning both of them here probably with faint praise. You are dealing with Mo Salah, who's right now, and has been for 5-6 years, one of the most exciting, best players in the whole planet. Top 5 minimum. And one of the most exciting young prospects in terms of being able to play that role. That's what you're actually dealing with.
I think it's more Dalglish Rush, if we're going to stretch the metaphor.
Yeah, go on.
Well, in as much as we're talking about Salah dropping into this Tenny role, he's not using his pace. He's not the little guy in the sense that, say, a Paul.
Not chasing
he's dropping in, and then there's this arrowhead forward who's timing. And the thing about Darwin Nunez, whether people have liked or been cynical about his Liverpool career thus far, his movement is exceptional. It's unreal the way he can run a line.
I think his pressing's come on
Yes,
massively as well. There was the goal against Villa, the first goal against Villa, where him and Salah presses one and win the corner. But within about 2 minutes of him coming on, him and Diaz had basically harassed someone into the corner, just giving us a throw-in.
Yeah.
And his all-round game, I think he looks like he's pre-seasoned very well, because I thought he was excellent for the third goal as well, because I'm pretty sure the referee's given him an advantage when he's running away as well. If you look at Mike Oliver's got his arm out like he's playing on, because I think Craig Dawson has him in a headlock and he manages to shrug him off
on the halfway, near just past halfway line.
The ball,
Craig Dawson was great, by the way. He was a separate conversation.
Proper centre forward play, wasn't he?
He wins the ball, he drives into the space, he gets the ball out to Salah.
Oh yeah, it's a great pre-assist that.
I think him and Diaz look like they've got a little bit of a rapport, don't they? I mean,
they're good friends, aren't they?
Yeah, he does brilliantly. Nunez does brilliantly. Diaz does brilliantly, but the chance that Nunez should score, really, shouldn't he? When play a little 1-2, but his instinct is just so good, in the sense of he fires it into someone's throat, and it's like, wow, that's not a great ball, but he's like, well, I'm going to get it back anyway. I'm sort of, and he ends up in front of goal. So often he gets into it, and I think that's just, it's so encouraging.
It's you can talk a lot about the fact that he does miss on occasions. For me, I don't want to do the old cliche as long as he's getting the chances. It's not so much the idea of he's getting the chances and then he's missing them, where someone's whacking it on a plate for him. Like, for instance, let's imagine he misses the Gakpo one, or even the one he misses against Villa that comes to the back post that he should score. It's not dissimilar to the Cunha one, where I think he's not quite sure what part of his body to go for it with. But for me, so often, it's not like it's been absolutely put on a plate for him. He's made it. He's forced the issue.
And he hit the target. He does often hit the target, doesn't he? And it is one of them that we keep saying it. Obviously, he's going to score bucket loads, but I do think it is. And I mean, we're going to come on to the Europa League. You've asked me to write a team down. He was the first name. He was the first name I wrote in that Europa League, because I think give him a couple of goals against a Europa League group stage, and just try and feed off this confidence, because he's obviously, to coin the manager's phrase, in a good moment at the moment.
He's in a good moment. It suits them. I think the Salah thing, Rob, and I take your point around, he's not going to be the 2017 Salah where he's running away from everyone, but he's still got enough pace to get in and get past. And I think this is a really important detail as to how he's able to create this space. Because as I said before, people still stand off him because they don't want to give him a 5-yard foot race, because he can still beat them.
Oh yeah.
So that's what I think. This is a really interesting little dynamic that we suddenly got, because I think it suits. I think you're not far away from saying it sort of suits everyone, and that's not a bad place to be. But I think that this in particular, the idea of, I think Diaz suits left mid becoming left wing. I think Elliott suits right mid tucked in, helping out a little bit. I think you can pair him, as you said before, the midfielders. I wouldn't be averse to seeing a little bit of Salah next to Jota. Because I think Jota's got that sense of. I take your point is that he's not Nunez. He's not going to absolutely marmalise people, but he's got that sort of sharp movement. But I think, Rob, I really wouldn't mind seeing a bit of this, whether it's in the Europa League or something, because I think Liverpool having it in their back pocket is really, really valuable.
I think it is. It is fascinating how it suits. The more you think about it, certain personnel. I mean, even going back to the point about Robertson, how high he is. If you just say, let's for example say Trent can be a midfielder a lot of the time, and I think there's all kinds of pressure for that, and I don't get into the debate about whether he should or shouldn't be, but it's quite possible he is seen as a serious option there. So our next right back is a more conservative full-back in Joe Gomez. That's okay in a 4-4-2 because you can be a bit lopsided. It gives you more licence for the left-sided guy who's like a winger, Andy Robbo, to absolutely bomb on, and it swivels round on itself, and Joe sits in. And you just... I remember, was it Chelsea under Ancelotti were very like that, where Ashley Cole was nominally their left back. But I remember watching them at Anfield one day and thinking, he's just... They're virtually a back three, and he's right up in...
Even Ivanovic right back.
Yeah, that exactly. Ivanovic was centre-half right back, wasn't he? So... I could see that it's, again, I'm not suggesting that Trent plays in midfield necessarily, but you can see all kinds of scenarios where it suits this set of players.
The moves in there as well. Last little thing, Phil, I was really pleased with the Konate cameo. I think Quansah does brilliantly, but Konate comes and just immediately shows that level of presence. And you've got to be careful not to talk yourself into corners again. It's in a different shape and all that sort of stuff. I think he sort of suits playing that left-hand side. It's an odd thing, but I think it suits him to be able to open his body and see that much of the pitch as well. I mean, that to one side, I just thought it was one of those 15-20 minutes where you get to see someone's absolute class in a way that you maybe miss sometimes from kickoff.
I think he's played the left side for France. I think it's usually Upamecano on the right and him on the left for
Leipzig as well.
But yeah, I think there's the one thing I like was he wins a slide tackle about 25, 30 yards from their goal, and we're basically playing a two-man defence at this point. So he's backed himself to win it. He's got really high up the pitch, really aggressive. He just looks like he's got everything, and this is still someone who's young, isn't it? Like, this is not. We're not talking 27, 28, 29. Yeah, you can still see there's little bits of improvement in him. You can still see, not deficiencies, that's probably too harsh a word, but you can still see there's little things about decision making. Like, for example, the penalty he gives away against Villa back end of last season, where he just gets a little bit exposed and it's a bit rash. Now, over time, he just won't make that challenge, and he'll gamble on him having the shot and, you know, hope for the best. But you see these things, and it's just very exciting, isn't he?
He's Van Dijk's replacement for me.
I agree. I feel like we have the man we can build the team around from what, let's just say 3 years' time, when Van Dijk is, you know, he might last longer. Van Dijk might be Thiago Silva and might still be here in 25 years or something like that. But it looks like that is the man we can build this defence around for the long term.
And people will say, everybody looks better playing alongside Konate. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So we'll be replacing those lads, not Van Dijk.
Really good that he didn't have to pick him. You know, because obviously that's the big worry with him, isn't it? Is like, you know, how fragile he is, or how many games he misses. It isn't half good that Liverpool were able to resist the temptation to go, well, he's fit now, he has to go straight back in. They've actually took a bit of a gamble by not playing him, but it's paid off. And like you say, we talk about bench. That's when you see Jarell. If you said to someone, Jarell Quansah's going off 15 minutes from the end with cramp, you go, oh God, who's coming on for him? You know, like that would have been the thing. You know, like if Jarell Quansah's starting, who's coming on for him? It's Ibrahim and Konate coming on, and yeah, looking after Harvey Elliott, security.
That was funny. He's done that before. Do you remember there was one where I think it was United away? His first, I think, is the United away, the 5-0, where
Fred.
I think was it Pogba or Fred who kicked the
Ronaldo,
ball?
Curtis Jones,
Curtis Jones, and he's like the bouncer. There's something like the bouncers have turned up.
There's a picture of you put it out, didn't you? The Anfield Wrap put it out, his best moments, and it was the first picture is him just laughing at Fred, isn't he? Sort of, what are you doing?
What are you doing here? Yeah, all really, really good indeed. All right, let's move ourselves forward and talk a little bit about Wolverhampton Wanderers and who's going to be a serious proposition in what way over the course of this season. And let's start off just quickly on Wolves. Phil, you were there. Neto, I think if he stays fit, a serious proposition this season. I did a bit of a thing where I went down the league in my head and tried to work out who's got a better player in that position than him. And I think you can make an argument around Martinelli, but if I was Arsenal, I wouldn't be averse to the idea of playing him there and moving Martinelli central. I think you can make, you know, an argument that we've got a few good lads. City have got a couple of good lads. Beyond that, I'm struggling.
It'd make a difference at Manchester United.
It'd make a difference at Manchester United because you move Rashford.
Yeah. He's unbelievable.
He's Matoma maybe, but I think Neto is so good. He was so good.
Yeah, I felt a bit sorry for Joe Gomez sort of first 20-25 minutes because people were like, oh, I can't believe what's he doing there, and then sometimes someone just does something good. Like after the first goal, I sort of was reading one of my group chats back at half time, and someone's like, Matip for that goal, and then I'm watching it, I'm like, what? Well, the only thing Joel Matip could have done is dangle the leg out and hope for the best, because a man with really good close control, good technique, good skill, and a good burst of pace just went past him.
Pace.
And he's just very good. Sometimes you just have to say that there feels like there's a thing where if Liverpool can see the goal or something bad happens or something that we don't want to see, there has to be a blame apportioned to someone, as opposed to just going, that footballer just did something really good there. And that's what Pedro Neto does. The nutmeg on Gomez and the cross for Cunha, it's a fantastic cross.
It's an unbelievable
Cunha
cross.
Makes a complete hash of that. Like, I almost feel like if Sasa Kaladzic was on the pitch, that's 2-0. And he's not a particularly brilliant footballer by any stretch of the imagination, but he puts the ball on a plate in the middle of the 6-yard box. He can't do much more than that. He's brilliant for the goal. He's a nuisance. He's a menace. He wasn't quite unplayable, but you could see how he becomes a player who you just look at and go, Christ, we're playing Wolves this week, we've got to stop him.
Well, I think this is, going back to the original points before West Ham go ahead against City. Tottenham, it's not the first time this season Tottenham have been behind and they've trusted the way to goals and the fact that they attack to get themselves back in, which isn't dissimilar to what you've seen from Liverpool. But thinking about that Wolves side, I think in general, the sides, I include Liverpool in this, I include Liverpool both as a club, a team in this, that maybe being a bit smarter early on in games and allowing for the idea that they've got 4 or 5 really good players who, if they play above their level for 15 minutes, they're going to hurt us. And that's what happens, Neil. But then also supporters, us in general, just being able to go, but this might well punch itself out. We've seen that before as well. I think it's a difficult one because I want to feel like Liverpool are completely prepared on the one hand, but on the other hand, if a side does do what I said before, put all the chips on, and then they've got Neto who's in the form he's in, it's easy for me to say, well, you should have probably have a plan for that, because the football manager and the footballers would be saying, lads, you try and come up with a plan with this. You can't deal with money like that. Yeah,
absolutely. I think probably the biggest worry for Liverpool in that first half was that they didn't have anyone doing it. They none of their big guns were doing what he was doing. If you're having a bit of a boxing match with it, you'd have been saying, well, okay, we'll take a few hits off him, but we're landing a few with Salah or Gakpo or whoever. It just felt like it was Neto and Semedo, really, wasn't it? With the two who were really sort of prominent in that first half.
Bellegarde played well for 45 and then
and João Gomez as well. A few nice moments from him. I think it was a bit anonymous second half, but Neto's. I just remember him at Anfield. The first time when he give it beans and the VAR took it off, and didn't he? I liked it. I thought that's. I'll keep an eye on this, lads. And actually, when Liverpool went and bought Jota, there was a case to say, did he get the wrong one there? Should he got And he's had injuries obviously since then, which has really set him back and probably set Wolves back hugely. He's probably, I think, if he'd carried on without those injuries, he'd probably be at a Champions League club now. I think he's that. He's still, was he 22, 23?
Is that all he is? We've been linked to him for years. It's just the injuries.
Martinelli's a good comparison. I think that's who he reminds me of as a player. Martinelli, he's just lively and sharp. He's got a bit of bite about him. You can tell he doesn't mind if he won. I can imagine he'd be gabbing to the fullback saying, "Done it again there." That type. He's got a bit of that about him, hasn't he? And if they give him a centre forward, he might get some assists. But I think he did say, didn't he? Create the most chances. Create the most chances.
He's got the second most assists, not behind Salah.
Yeah, in a team that doesn't score any goals, which is some achievement.
What I noticed where I was in the ground second half, he was on my side. I saw him very close up. I'd only ever seen him on the TV really before from a distance. He's not tall, but he's a unit.
Yeah,
he's
all Premier League players are units, aren't they?
But he's really barrel shaped.
As a mixed zone regular, right? You can see them a mile. You look at him and go, he's like. I look at him as like little Jared Bowen or someone. And you go, wow, he filled me in.
Gym guys,
he would absolutely bury me.
Yeah, I was surprised how powerful he was. As much I knew he had technique, but it was the second half he cut a frustrated figure, which was credit to us, because the ball. A number of times he'd make a run, or we'd think I'm going to get it, and it just wouldn't arrive.
They were aiming for him with the Sarr was aiming for him with the kick, wasn't he? It was him, and that's about the only defence you can have. Is like, well, I was kicking it to our only real threat, but good player.
The business. There's more of that to come, I think, over the course of the campaign. I think that one of the things to point out, I think, with the exception of, I would argue, the current bottom four, and even that to an extent, because of there's a couple of questions. Everton have got a couple of players, but the current bottom four, I feel like everyone's got at least two real threats that they're able to put on the pitch every week. And
there's going to be a lot of hard away games this season. I think even when you look on paper and go, we should beat this team quite comfortably.
People like that.
Yeah. I sort of think. I remember, Ferguson once said, if you lose more than 6 games, you won't win the league. That's because away games used to be really hard, and it almost feels like we're back in that territory.
Yeah. I think you almost need to channel Gerard Houllier, maybe Rafa Benitez, where I was saying to Steve Graves with the match beforehand. You'd go to those grounds and accept that you were going to be crap for 20 minutes. But what wasn't going to happen, there was going to be no decent chances for them. They'd do all their huffing and puffing, but they'd only have 0-0 to show for it on 20. Yeah. And then we'd have, like in Julio's era, Owen O'Heskey on the break, and Gerrard could play a pass once the threat had been blunted. I almost think if you're talking about teams that are going to do to us what the likes of Wolves are going to do to us, be that team, be compact, show minimal ambition apart from the transitions. And I do think personnel is important. Neil touched on this. With Gakpo and Jota, I felt we didn't have anything in the transitions really. Salah felt very isolated. The midfield, there wasn't any runners. The difference with having Diaz and Nunez on, and I know they come on against tiring legs, is they're both much more swashbuckling forwards.
They come on against tiring legs, but it's worth pointing out that because of the way added time's going to work, Diaz comes on, he knows he's getting 55 minutes. Yeah. Nunez and Elliott get 45 minutes. It's worth pointing that out, the way in which the game goes. Last little thing on it, just quick, Rob, from my point of view, I agree. I think I would be looking to start Darwin Nunez in a lot of away games, because the fact that I think he just makes where you're going to put your line and how that's going to go may be really rather difficult. Lask, my guess is he goes stronger than the prevailing view has been.
I think you're right.
I'll go into the why first and foremost. It seems to me like the second seeds in the group, it's the away game against the second seeds in the group. But the other thing about the group is the three sides who could all take points off each other. which makes me feel as though if Liverpool can just stamp their authority on it, they've got this, then they've got 2 homes, and then the back-to-back game is Toulouse, who are the 4th seeds in the group. And I just sort of think, if I have to go to Phil first, Phil, I think if on that if they can stamp their authority on this, then I think it will take the pressure off the forthcoming games, because the one thing Liverpool don't want is A, it's still being alive with 1 game to go, whether that's first or second, because B, they definitely want to come first because they don't want to play the double-header against the Champions League teams in February.
Yeah, I think you get 4 games before the November international break. I think that's right, isn't it?
Yes.
So I think if Liverpool win those 4 games, it would be very hard with the way the other teams are to see a world where they haven't already won the group, and I think that would be vitally important.
No, just on that, again, this seems like I'm doing loads of details for listeners, but they might not be sort of on top of it because they're not me and you, Phil. Part of the reality of them playing Toulouse home and away means that when they're playing Toulouse home and away in those back-to-back games, Lask and Union SG are playing each other, and you'd think they'd take points off each other.
Yeah, some groups is odd. I remember we got in the Champions League in 09-10, we get Fiorentina, Lyon, and Debrecen, and Debrecen were terrible, and we were effectively in a 3-team group where 2 of the games just didn't matter because everybody just took 6 points off them and they were just wastes of time. So you lose points, you're in a problem. But whereas we're in the opposite situation this time, I think that the other 3 teams they could all finish on 7 points. Like Liverpool could win. I think Liverpool could theoretically win all 6 games. Although if it come to it, I don't think we play USG.
Last game.
3 days before we play Manchester United at home in December, before a crowded December. You can see a world where they just send anyone they fancy, because it's a bit different with the Europa League, isn't it? With the Champions League, your youth players are all in that youth league in the afternoon. This isn't a thing now, so you could theoretically just play.
And also you get 3 million. You get 3 million for winning the game. Yeah, exactly. In the Champions League.
It is a different dynamic. I think Liverpool will be stronger on Thursday, and I think strong for the first few games than people think. I think it helps that next week is the League Cup, and not like last season where you're playing Champions League, Champions League, Champions League. That was a nightmare schedule that you just couldn't wear on. That doesn't exist now. The players who want to rest can have the rest next week, and then we play Tottenham, whereas West Ham will still have to take the game relatively seriously, because West Ham have effectively ended up in one of those 3-team groups. They're playing Topola, I think, is it?
Yeah, they've got the 4th team in this one.
They'll be lucky to get a point, I think.
And it matters more to them.
Yeah, exactly. So but they'll, from a qualifying point of view, they'll want to go fully at Topola on Thursday and get the 3 points. So they'll be in a position where they'll have had a game as well. That helps us with this. I think we'll play I think the midfield will be rotated. I think the left back maybe. But it wouldn't shock me if the front 3 was Salah, Nunez and Diaz, given that the 2 of them actually came on at half-time and Mohamed Salah just wants to play football.
I think Salah will start.
Yeah, I do as well.
He does have to work backwards from the West Ham game, though, doesn't he? I mean,
I think he works backwards in the Leicester game, Rob.
Well, I think the Leicester game...
I think maybe the selection of Quansah over Konate suggests he's working forwards towards the last game. As mad as that is, that's what I begin to wonder.
Surely Quansah won't play, will he, Thursday? No. If you go off with cramp, I can't see you're going to. Matip won't play Thursday because
Van Dijk hasn't played football.
I've got my team written down. The only question mark I've got is Van Dijk. As would you put him in?
See, I don't think that's a question mark. I think he's almost first name on the team sheet.
Probably in there, isn't he? Because he hasn't had the game, and there's a few there. I think I've got Nunez in. I've got Jota in. I think Gomez will have to play right back. I think Konate and Van Dijk, and then my midfield would be Endo, Elliott, and Gravenberch as a 3.
Yeah, that's the same midfield.
But you could have Stefan Bajcetic in there for any of those 3, really. Given.
Do you think they might just try and get Bajcetic sort of 30 minutes? At the
end? Possibly, or give him the Leicester. He might get the Leicester game.
I can see 4 substitutions on 60 here.
Yeah. So that's what I think.
I can see Salah coming on 60.
I think he goes off on 60. I think he might start Salah, Nunez, Diaz, and then finish the game with Doak, Jota, and Gakpo as a front 3.
I've got Doak starting because I just think the way he plays lends itself to a sort of an away game where it's just like no one knows about him, and he just go and just gets
the only thing I think is going from not being on the bench on Saturday.
But he mentioned them, didn't he, in his post-match? He said we've got really good options. He said, don't forget we had Ben Doak, who wasn't even in the squad. He said, which is like almost like, I've probably had the conversation with him and said, look, don't, like, your chances are coming. Obviously, it might be the Leicester game.
You can also name more subs in Europe as well. I think you get 12 subs, don't you?
I think you do. Yeah. I think it'll be.
Kelleher. Sorry, I've got Kelleher there. I'm wavering on that in the sense of with the Leicester game.
The Leicester game really.
I think until we hear or see, I think you just got to assume it's Alisson. I mean, it might not be Alisson, but I sort of think that with the way of what we're sort of aware of, it's like, well, Alisson's the first choice keeper until we see evidence otherwise.
I think he said in the past, hasn't he, a lot, Klopp, the domestic cups are Queeves. Competitions. He's never done it with the Champions League, I suppose, so why would he do it with the Europa League? But and Tsimikas have got in as well as the left back.
I think he'll start Robertson.
I think he'll give Tsimikas a game just to make sure that he's there, you know, in terms of he might be needed in a league game, and if you don't want to bring him in where it's like he hasn't played since May.
The reason why I think he'll start Robertson, I think he'll start Robertson in this one because he hasn't got Trent, and I think, but also I think part of the reason I think he'll start Alisson is it gives him an opportunity to have a game at least for a period where he's got Alisson, Konate, Van Dijk, and Robertson all together, and I think he'll think we haven't had a lot of that. We need a little bit of that here. I also think that if you're Tsimikas, you're getting Leicester, and I think you get the home game against Union before the break. So I think you get the USG game before the break as well. That gives you 2. It means Robertson's on 5. I think if you almost go down the list, because of his injury, you're going to end up here where maybe Trent gets 4 of the 7, Robertson 5 of the 7, Van Dijk 4 or 5 of the 7. Konate doesn't start Wolves, so he's probably getting 4 or 5 of the 7. I think when you begin to sort of go, I think one of the things about them, Neil, is I think you can get carried away with the idea of using the Europa League to rest them loads, because they're also all used, well, not all, but many of them are used to doing Champions League as well. They're used to having a run of 7 where they're actually playing in 6, let alone 4 and 5.
Yeah, but I think that maybe the difference this is that you'd be looking at all of those Champions League games. And I know Liverpool won some heavy ones last season. They battered Rangers, didn't they, in 2 games. But you're looking at those games thinking, these are, like, we don't want to make too many changes for these games because you can come up. I still think you're looking, I mean, it's a strange looking team I've got written down in some ways. But even if you swap out, say you put Gakpo in, or you put Diaz in for Doak, or Salah in for Doak, say you don't want to play Van Dijk and you want to play, you know, God, I'm trying to even think of anyone else who's going to play Quansah. Let's go. You're still looking at it and going, well, shouldn't lose. You know, shouldn't be losing against Lask. And
will Trent be fit for that? He said he'd be doing ball work. I
don't think he'd be. No, I don't think he'd have played if he was 100%. But I definitely don't think they'll put a risk in him. He'll probably be in. He said early next week, didn't he? Or early this week that he'd be back. So I wouldn't have thought. So
West Ham.
I would have thought. But you look, there's players there that just, you know.
They need a game.
You could play McAllister's come off after 45 minutes. You could easily just say to him, just get back out there and, you know, don't worry about that. Get out of your system.
You've got to be a bit careful, haven't you, in terms of, because I've seen enough sort of League Cup and early round FA Cup ties over the last sort of 5 years with Klopp as manager, where you make a load of changes and all of a sudden Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain was like Liverpool's best midfielder, which is not a position he's ever supposed to be in. He was a perfectly functional squad player when there's better players surrounding him. And you don't want to get into the position where you're asking players to sort of play above their level.
That's the worry with Gravenberch as well, isn't it? Is if you give him his debut in a sort of mismatched team and he doesn't go well, and you're sort of looking, Gravenberch.
You're hanging people out to dry.
Endo, but I just think that the overall quality is better. It's not a case of where you're looking at like Danny Ward's playing in goal, and you know you're having sort of
Conor Randall.
You know, like no disrespect to any of these players, but it was one of them when it just looked like they were getting an 11 out. It was just like, well, you can play. This looks like it can be a team.
This is why I think there isn't a League Cup team as such this year. The squad has got more depth in a certain sense, in that it's more of a homogenous squad. We were talking about earlier with the up team number 8s or double pivot 6s. I think more fascinating is pick your team for Leicester. I bet it looks really good. Do you know what I mean? It isn't going to have Harvey Blair in it. Unless there's a little mini injury spell. No disrespect to Harvey Blair. I don't think you're going to see, or even a Tyler Morton. I don't think you're going to. I know they're not necessarily available. I'm not that level of football. I think Quansah and Ben Doak will be the bottom level.
Like the Derby,
Bobby Clark,
like
maybe, but even then.
But do you remember the Derby League Cup game last year? Like, I think Frauendorf, Leighton Stewart.
Well, exactly my point.
Doesn't feel like we're doing that now.
No, I see you throw Bobby Clark in there, and I was wargaming this with Stephen the Cargarass. I don't think Bobby Clark gets a game starts. Like I think he'll be on the bench, gets minutes. I'm not sure. Leicester, yeah. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean,
he's got a chance to be on the bench
as well. You know, like
he's
that's sort of like.
Well, I think that the interest in Bobby Clark. If I'm Bobby Clark, one of the things I'm thinking is I really hope Liverpool are 3-0 up on the hour mark at Lask and Leicester, both games, off the basis of the fact that then it will get on. Whereas if they're not, then it'll be a different type of sub, I think. I think the other thing that's interesting is obviously with the players who are also coming back who haven't got that much. And also, one of the things that you do want is that you want to be able to, I think Leicester, I think Leicester, could be wrong, but I think it'll be two of the 4 who aren't Salah. plus Stoke, because two of the four who aren't Salah won't have actually played that much football. I've just said there before. Obviously they both go off when they go off.
I think you would quite like to look at some of them as well, because it feels like Gakpo and Jota are sort of
I need a goal,
attached a little bit, and Nunez and Diaz are attached a little bit. It feels like they're the two pairs, but you wouldn't mind seeing Gakpo and Nunez in a game, and sort of seeing Jota and Diaz or whatever. So it does give you an option to look at different permutations in the front three.
It does indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure. Liverpool beating Wolverhampton Wanderers by 3-1. Thank you very much to Green King for sponsoring the show, and also to Rob, to Phil, and to Neil. The video has been produced by Ash as it's wore on, and the audio has been produced as ever by Andy as that's wore on as well. We are all off to go and get booked for excessive celebration. See you later.